Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name's Rhiannon and today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in June. I have 6 books to talk to you guys about today, which is definitely a good number of books for me. I have definitely been up and down with my reading in terms of books read per month, so this is fantastic and I have read some amazing books this month as well. I didn't quite manage to get to all of the books on my set TBR, however I am happy with the stack as I mentioned. I've definitely been mood reading a lot more, which I don't mind as long as I'm reading, it's fine. So this might be a little different from my TBR, but I hope you enjoy hearing my thoughts about these books nonetheless. The first book I finished in June was The Outsiders by Michelle Paver, which is the first book in the Gods and Warriors series. You guys may know that Michelle Paver is one of my all-time favourite authors. She is the author of the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series, which I have on my shelves right here, and that is the series that did get me into reading. So I have been looking at her other books for a while, and when I was at Yelk last year I saw that all of her books in the Gods and Warriors series were available to buy, and so that is exactly what I did. I do have all 5 of them. I decided that June was the perfect month to start reading them because this series is set in ancient Greece. Now it isn't actually set in the ancient Greece that we think about today. This book is actually set before that in the Bronze Age of ancient Greece. I will read you a section of the author's note because this just gives you a better idea of the setting. It says the story of Hylas and Pyrrha takes place 3,500 years ago in what we now call the Bronze Age. As you may have gathered, it happens in the land we call ancient Greece. However, the Greece of the Bronze Age was very different from the ancient Greece of marble temples and classical sculpture with which you may be familiar. The Bronze Age was long before that. It was even before the Greeks arranged their gods and goddesses into an orderly pantheon of Zeus, Hera, Hades and all the others. We don't know much about Bronze Age Greece as we do about what came afterwards because its people left so few written records. However, we know something about the astonishing cultures which flourished at that time and which we call the Mycenaeans and the Minoans. Theirs is the world of gods and warriors. You guys know how much I love ancient Greece as a setting, and regardless of the fact that this was set even earlier than what we consider to be ancient Greece, I absolutely loved it. I think that Michelle Paver just manages to write natural settings so well. She has been to Greece, she has scoped out the landscape, she has done so much research for this book that it definitely feels like this is how it was back then. You can tell that she's put blood, sweat and tears into this, and I definitely appreciate her as an author for that because the same goes with the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series. She did a lot of work and research for that, going to different countries. She went to a wolf sanctuary because one of our main characters is a wolf, and she went to the Antarctic, I believe, as well in order to do research for that series. So she is definitely dedicated. She loves to learn herself, and it definitely does come across in her books. These are very factual books without them being too formal and informative. So in this one we follow our main character Hylas, and at the start of this novel him and his sister are attacked. Now Hylas has no clue who attacked them or why, but he is separated from his sister and he decides to go on a quest across the hostile mountains and treacherous seas of ancient Greece. Now of course he does meet some companions along the way, including a young female and a very helpful little dolphin as well. Another thing that I love about this book is that we do get the dolphin's perspective, same as we do in the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series with Wolf, and that just makes it all the more enjoyable because you guys know I'm a massive animal lover, and so to get the perspective of an animal throughout this book as he watches these main characters go on their quest is just hilarious, and the barriers between animals and humans communicating is shown through this, but it's really interesting to see how they kind of work around that to understand each other and communicate with each other. I did end up giving this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Not quite the 5-star feeling for me. I didn't love it as much as the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series. However, that one is definitely nostalgic to me, whereas this one is a new series. I don't have that emotional connection to it, so it's definitely understandable that I'm not enjoying it as much. However, that's not to say it's a bad book. I absolutely loved it. The only thing I will say actually is that we do have a death of an animal in here, which does happen pretty early on in the book, and even though it's not really mentioned in a lot of detail, it is something that happens. It is something that stays with the character and is often referred back to, which I was going to say I wasn't expecting. However, with this being set in ancient Greece, I did expect something to do with that, because obviously we have a lot of sacrifices and things back in that age. However, this is just a lot more personal and it made me really sad. So please do be aware of that before diving in. But this is a fantastic book. I am very excited to dive into the second book, which is now on my July TBR, and yeah, I can't wait to see where our characters go from here. Next up, I finished Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie, which is book 2 in the First Law trilogy. Now this is the first trilogy in an expansive world that Joe Abercrombie has built, so I definitely have a ways to go with this series. However, I'm almost done with this first trilogy now. This book, however, was a bit of a letdown for me. I did end up giving it 3 stars. It was just very lackluster, to be honest with you guys. The first book was really enjoyable. We got to see a lot of our characters, and in this one I thought the plot was going to progress a lot further. Essentially, in this series we follow Logan Ninefingers, who is a northern barbarian, Giselle Dunluther, who is a pompous fencing champion, and Inquisitor Glockter, who is essentially a torturer. Now their fates essentially intertwine when 2 separate countries launch an attack on the Union. We have a war with the North, and we also have a war with the Gurkish. At the end of the first book, things are progressing on with the war, and our characters seem to be set up to go where they need to go and to aid in the war efforts. However, we get a lot of traveling in this book, and we don't actually get the payoff that I wanted to from a kind of war novel. We're building up and building up and building up to this one big event that is going to be at the end of this book. However, that never comes. The thing they went searching for turns out not to be what they thought, and it essentially makes this whole journey invalid and pointless. I just feel like we wasted so much time going down that route. I feel like it wasn't really necessary, and I would have liked to see our characters in a different setting, or at least go and do something afterwards. So fair enough, they want to go on this quest, or some of them even don't want to go on this quest, but they end up going. I would have liked for that to have been a shorter amount of time, because we don't really see much along the way, and then I would have liked to see what happens afterwards a bit quicker than we got to it, because this book, whilst it wasn't a drag, I just feel like nothing really happened. I wasn't as invested in the characters and what was going on, and I just felt like this was a bit of a lull compared to the first book. Now I have started reading the third book. I can say I feel a lot better towards that one than I did with this one, so I'm hoping that the story just gets better and better. However, unfortunately, this wasn't the best for me. I did give it 3 stars, as I mentioned, which is not a bad rating. I just didn't have as much of an amazing time reading it as I thought I was going to, and we didn't get as many revelations as I thought we were going to get. So it was a middle of the road book for me. I am enjoying the next book in the series. I can't wait to see how it all wraps up, but unfortunately this book was a bit of a letdown, and I feel like that is the general consensus among everyone who has read this book as well. Next up, I read The Big Four by Agatha Christie, and this is another one that I gave 3 stars to. This is a weird one for me because I did enjoy it, but I was very confused throughout this whole book. That is until I found out that this is a book made up of short stories. However, these short stories have been turned into one long story now, but you can still tell that they were meant to be short stories, if that makes sense. I believe that they were released weekly as part of a magazine when they first came out, and the publishers have obviously decided to put them all together in order to make one story from all of those separate ones. I actually really did enjoy this one. I listened to the audiobook for it, which I would highly recommend, because the audiobooks for these are narrated by Hugh Fraser, who plays Captain Hastings in the ITV adaptations of Agatha Christie's works. I'm not going to go into how much I love those adaptations here, but this is a book that I did really enjoy. However, it was very strange and it was very unbelievable, I want to say, because essentially Poirot is battling some kind of supervillains here. He uses disguises throughout this and things like smoke bombs, and he has to find their secret lair and things like that, and whilst it was really just far-fetched and ridiculous, I actually did love it. I loved seeing Poirot in a different setting. I loved seeing him cook up some different schemes, and honestly it was quite refreshing. But in order to look at this critically, it definitely wasn't the best written book ever. As I mentioned, I was a bit confused about this book because I hadn't realised that it was meant to be a short story collection. You can definitely tell that it doesn't flow as smoothly as Agatha Christie's other novels. I am going to read you the synopsis quickly though, just so you can get a feel feel of what this book is about. It says, framed in the doorway of Poirot's bedroom stood an uninvited guest, coated from head to foot in dust. The man's gaunt face stared for a moment, then he swayed and fell. Who was he? Was he suffering from shock or just exhaustion? Above all, what was the significance of the figure 4 scribbled over and over again on a sheet of paper? Poirot finds himself plunged into a world of international intrigue, risking his life to uncover the truth about number 4. So essentially, the Big Four are an organisation of very rich and influential people who, of course, want to do bad things. Poirot and Hastings have several confrontations with members of the Big Four throughout this book, and it soon becomes clear that the Big Four are going to try and kill Poirot in order to get him out of the picture, because he seems to be the only one that can stop them from gaining global control. Not only that, but along the way, Hastings and Poirot also need to deal with the collateral damage that the Big Four leave in their wake, and as they try and uncover the identities of the people involved, they soon realise that there is a trail of bodies left for them as well, as anyone who knows anything about the Big Four and is threatening to blab is executed. So this is very different to Agatha Christie's other books, but as I mentioned, I did have fun with it. I didn't take it too seriously. It was so fun to see these characters in a different type of situation, and even though it was a short story collection that didn't flow exactly as I wanted it to, the story itself did work and it did ultimately make sense as a novel. So if you are a bit confused reading this, if you are a bit put off by it, please don't be. I really enjoyed it. Maybe the audiobook is the best route. As I mentioned, that is how I listen to it, and I feel like listening to it definitely made me enjoy it a lot more, especially because you get to kind of picture what's happening in your head with the different voices, whereas as you're just reading it, it's sometimes a little more difficult to believe what you are reading. So I would highly recommend the audiobook if you guys are unsure, or if you started reading it and put it down, maybe try it that way. As I mentioned though, this is one I gave 3 stars. Even though I did enjoy it, I don't think it's the best book ever written, and so again, this is a middle of the road book for me. Next up, we have Mindhunter Inside the FBI Elite Serial Crime Unit by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. John Douglas is the man who helped usher in a new age of behavioural science and criminal profiling. With over 25 years of experience in the field and having caught countless serial killers based on criminal profiling, it's safe to say that John Douglas does have a very good insight into the minds of serial killers. Now, you guys know that I am very interested in true crime. I watch a lot of true crime documentaries and YouTube videos, and I do also listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. However, true crime non-fiction is something that I'm still not 100% comfortable with yet, just because I can sometimes be a little bit too overwhelmed with factual non-fiction true crime books. I feel like sometimes it's way too clinical and it's way too formal, and because of that I do just get overwhelmed. However, again, I did turn to the audiobook for this one, and I did not think that it was confusing or daunting or too formal in any sense. This was very well written, very well told, and we do essentially just follow John Douglas as he lives his life and as his career progresses until he does ultimately set up his own criminal profiling unit. There are a lot of murders mentioned in this book and no detail is spared, so definitely be aware of that diving in. I will say that it didn't affect me too much, but as an avid true crime consumer, you could say that I'm kind of used to that by now, and so hearing some things that are a little bit more graphic don't have as much of a negative impact on me. As well as that though, Douglas does cover a range of different topics related to criminal profiling, such as why there aren't so many women serial killers, or whether serial killers could be rehabilitated and let back into society. And because of the way this is told, it isn't really set out into neat sections. It's more of a kind of flow of thoughts, where when he's talking about one murder, he'll be like, oh, and then this is another example of what I was talking about earlier, why there aren't as many serial killers that are female and things like that, which again is something I did appreciate because it just showed that it wasn't too formal. Once again, I like that we're sort of in John Douglas's mind and that we're following his train of thought as he's telling us about all of these different cases and how he managed to solve them, and one case ultimately leads on to the next, and the points that are raised in that one lead on to the next case. So whilst there isn't a set structure, there is some sort sort of structure to it. The first 100 pages follow his life and his adolescence, and then everything after that is related to criminal profiling and the things that he encountered whilst doing this job. Some serial killer cases that he discusses in here are Jeffrey Dahmer, Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, the Atlanta child murders, Edmund Kemper is in here as well. And then what I really appreciated as well is that John Douglas actually focused on a lot of lesser known, smaller murders, if that makes sense, where a killer only committed one killing or a killer committed a few killings. However, it wasn't as blown up in the media as other murder cases were, and so those cases did also get the same attention as the bigger cases, which is something you don't often see. And again, I did really appreciate that. I liked, again, seeing how he can get into the minds of these serial killers and know what they're thinking and know what their MO is, know what type of victims they're going to go for, know their backgrounds. It is honestly mind-blowing, and yeah, I really would recommend this book. Again, I'd recommend the audiobook, and this does also have a Netflix show, if you couldn't tell by the Netflix sticker on here, which I did start to watch a few months back. However, I got a few episodes in and stopped for some reason, but I will definitely be carrying on with that now. I feel like knowing the background behind it all as well is just going to keep my fascination and is going to make me want to watch it and just get as much as I can from John Douglas and Mindhunter. So this is definitely one that I would recommend, especially if you want to dive into true crime but you're not too sure where to start. This is definitely an interesting look at serial killers and criminal profiling, and I can say that I thoroughly enjoyed this one and gave it 4 stars. I'm actually a little bit confused about the last 2 books I'm going to talk about because I can't quite remember which of them I finished first. I honestly think I finished them both on the same day, so the order that I'm showing them to you may be wrong. However, the next book I read was Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, and this was such an amazing surprise for me, guys. I picked this up on a whim. I had finished the audiobook for Mindhunter, I believe it was, and I needed something else to listen to on my commute to and from work. So I checked Scribd, I saw this one there, and I thought, you know what? I wanted to get to it for a while. The sequel's coming out this year. I need to know whether I enjoy this one before I pre-order the sequel. And so I decided to listen to this audiobook, and I am so glad I did, you guys, because this was a 4-star read. As I mentioned, it was such a nice surprise. I fell in love with this, and I honestly keep thinking about it, which is definitely a sign that this is a good book. I am going to read you the synopsis for this one, mainly because I've just filmed my mid-year book freakout tag and I really did butcher the synopsis, so I feel like it's better for you to get a sense of what this book is actually about through the synopsis. It says, hidden among us is a secret coven of witches. Known as Her Majesty's Royal Coven, they protect crown and country from magical forces and otherworldly evil. But their greatest enemy will come from within. There are whisperings of a prophecy that will bring the coven to its knees, and 4 best friends are about to be caught at the centre. Will Helena, Neve, Leonie and Elle be able to stop the prophecy before it's too late? Or will the differences that have seen them grow apart since childhood be too great to overcome? Life as a modern witch was never simple, but now it's about to get apocalyptic. Prepare to be bewitched by Juno Dawson's first adult series, a story of ancient prophecies and modern dating, of sacred sisterhood and demonic frenemies. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, that synopsis didn't really sell me, which is why I was a little bit apprehensive diving into this book, because you guys know I love a fantastical setting, and whilst yes, this does have magic in it, it is a contemporary setting. However, as I mentioned, absolutely love this book. You definitely fall in love with the characters throughout this book, and there is a character in here who is trans, and we see their journey as they come to terms with the fact that they are trans. Now, Juno Dawson is transgender, so the rep in here is of course going to be fantastic. This book makes you feel every single emotion. I was so angry at the way that our trans character was being treated, and it truly does put things into perspective, because I genuinely don't get how people can be that bothered about what other people want to do with their bodies. If you feel like you are stuck in a body that isn't your own, then why is it a bad thing to want to go out and change that and turn into the person you want to be? There is so much prejudice in here, as I mentioned, and I'm not going to talk about it too much, but one of my cousins is actually transitioning, so I am now becoming more and more aware of the trans community and the issues that they face every day just trying to live their lives and be who they are. And so I did think that Juno Dawson put that across so well in this book, and it really did get to me. There is a part in this book where I just got so emotional because you see our main character come into their own, and it's just the most beautiful thing ever. It is so nicely done, it is so impactful and moving, and yeah, I just genuinely did love this book. book. The main characters as well are amazing. We follow 4 different main characters who have all gone down different paths. They are all so different, but of course the coven is what keeps them together, and so we see how they all come together, how their lives intertwine, and how they realise that a friendship from childhood isn't necessarily one that can carry on into adulthood once everyone has certain strong views. And again, it's nice to see that healthy debate in a friendship, but it's also nice to see that when people make those really awful statements, that those friends can then say, actually, I really don't agree with the person you've become. If those are your thoughts, well then fine, but I don't agree with them, and so I'm taking myself out of the situation and I don't want you in my life anymore, which is so healthy, and I feel like everyone needs to be able to do that. So yeah, this book just tackled so many different issues. There is so much representation in here. Trans, as I mentioned, lesbian, we have a black main character as well, and so it definitely feels like such an inclusive book, and I feel like so many people will be able to resonate with what's going on in here and identify with some of the characters and what they're going through. So if you couldn't tell, this is a book that I would highly recommend. I'm honestly debating upping it up to a 5 actually, especially with that ending, because oh my gosh you guys, this ends on a massive cliffhanger. Something happens where I was just like, what? And I genuinely don't know how to deal with it, so I need book 2. I haven't pre-ordered it because I'm going to try and get my hands on the matching Fairy Loot edition. Wish me luck guys, because that's going to be impossible, but I really did enjoy this one. I would highly recommend you pick it up, especially the audiobook, because the narrator is phenomenal, and I will definitely be continuing on with the series and picking up more books from Juno Dawson in the future. And then the last book I have is my favourite book that I've read so far this year, and is definitely up there as an all-time favourite, and that is of course Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I'm so glad that I finally decided to pick this one up, you guys, because I've been putting it off ever since it came out. I have been so scared by the hype. I just didn't think that it would live up to the hype for me, but as you can tell, it definitely did. This is a 5-star read, and I am so happy that I finally decided to pick it up and give it a go. So in this one, we follow our main character, Violet. Now, she has trained her whole life to become a scribe. However, her mother, who is a general up in the Dragon Riders Quadrant, decides that being a scribe just won't fit the pristine image that she and her family have built, and so Violet is conscripted into the Dragon Riders Quadrant, which is the deadliest quadrant you could enter. It is high stakes. The trials that you need to complete are essentially made to test your different skills, and they are made to be so difficult that the weak essentially are killed, because once you complete the trials and you are accepted into the Dragon Riders Quadrant, you are given the chance to bond with a dragon. Now, there are way too many humans than dragons in order for every single person to bond, and because Violet is one of the weakest people there, she already has a target on her back. But not only that, a rebellion started up a few years ago, and that was quickly wiped out. The rebel leaders were all executed, and their children were conscripted into the Dragon Riders Quadrant as well. And so because Violet is the general's daughter, there are a lot of people that would like to kill her just to get revenge on General Sorengale. So not only is Violet fighting for her life during the trials, she is also fighting for her life from day to day. The Riders Quadrant is such a brutal place. Everyone's out to get each other, and the stakes are just so high constantly. But since Violet has a lot of knowledge as a scribe, she does manage to use what she learnt there to help her, and she also learns different things along the way as she prepares for the trials as well. That's all I'm going to say about that one. I don't want to say too much because I really don't want to spoil anything for you guys. I went into this one not really knowing anything, not really having too many expectations, and of course this book blew me away. I will say the writing's not the best, I can appreciate that. However, you get so sucked into the story, the plot, and the characters and all their drama that the writing doesn't matter as much, because you're like, oh, I'll just ignore that weird line that was said there. It really doesn't have as much of an impact on this book as maybe other books would, because the plot is just so well done and it just drags you in. So I've definitely overlooked a few things. However, I just love this book so much. I haven't felt this much enjoyment whilst reading a book since reading a Sarah J Maas book, to be honest with you guys, and I got all the feelings reading this that I did whilst reading those Sarah J Maas books, which are some of my favourite books ever. So this is definitely a new favourite of mine. Absolutely loved it. The romance in this, the characters in this, the friendships, the dragons, everything is just phenomenal. And if you haven't picked this one up yet, please go ahead and do so because it is just amazing. It will change your life, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about this book ever since. I feel like I'm in such a weird book hangover at the minute, but it's worth it. I'm desperate to reread this one. The second book is coming out in November, so I definitely feel like I will do a reading vlog where I read this one and then dive into the second one. But I am terrified to see where the story's gonna go because the way this book ended, it broke me. It genuinely did break me. Something happens and then another thing happens and you're just like, whoa, this is too much. I need to process it, so I will definitely have time between now and November to kind of sit back and just reflect on what's gone on. But I love this book. I love how high stakes it is. I love the dragons, as I mentioned, and the connection that they have between their humans. I forgot to say actually, but once a dragon has bonded to you, if you die, your dragon can still survive. However, if your dragon dies, you also die. So essentially it's rubbish for the humans either way, but being bonded to a dragon is so cool, and I would definitely do that if I was given the opportunity. The dragons in here are so badass as well. They don't take any shit from anyone, and they know that they are above humans and that humans need to respect them and bow down to them, and if you get in their way, they will incinerate you. So yeah, it is such a funny book, even though it's got its really dark and serious moments, and it does also have some steamy moments for those of you who enjoy that. So all in all, this book had it all, and again, I'm so glad that I read this one because it is a new favourite book of mine. So there we have it, you guys. These are all of the books that I read in June. If you've read any of these books, please leave me your spoiler-free thoughts down below. I would love to chat to you guys about them because, as you saw, I did enjoy each one, even the ones I rated a little bit lower. If you have made it this far through into the video and would like to let me know that you're still here, please go ahead and leave me a dragon emoji down in the comments. With me finding my new favourite book this month, and with it being dragon focused and having dragons on the cover, I feel like that is a pretty good emoji to use for this video. So if you don't have anything in particular that you would like to say, but you would like to let me know that you're still here, please go ahead and comment that now. If you'd like to support me further, you can click the like button if you like this video and the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content from me. But that is it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. It truly does mean the world to me, and I will see you soon in my next video. Goodbye!